Hi, my name is Rachel Westover Nielsen, and the administrators of Help International asked me to record a vlog about my experience at the Hogar del Nino orphanage in El Salvador. I must admit, this is my first time ever recording a vlog, so I hope I'm not too awkward and I hope I'm not too long-winded. I've thought about how to capture in words this experience that has spanned 7 years of my life and has become such a huge part of my life, and I'm going to attempt to do that today. I first got involved at the Hogar during the summer of 2005 when I was a volunteer with Help International. I'd heard about the Hogar. Previous Help International volunteers had gone there several times and had volunteered there, and I heard that it was a home for kids and adults with physical and mental disabilities. Some of them orphaned, but most of them abandoned by their families because their families could not care for their needs. So they were abandoned at the orphanage, and most of them will stay there for the entirety of their lives because the facilities in El Salvador, around El Salvador, are not handicap accessible. So I remember the day that I approached the Hogar. I was full of excitement and anticipation. I had worked at an Easter Seals camp in the United States in the mountains of Colorado for many, many years before, in high school and in my first few years of college, and I loved my work there. So I was very much looking forward to working with the same population of people, but in a foreign country, and seeing the differences and seeing what I could perhaps offer with my experience from Easter Seals. So I remember walking up to the gate full of excitement, nervous, and who should greet me but Xiomara. And she's a young woman who lives at the Hogar. She's a resident there. And she's wacky and fun and funny. She has a mental disability and just always keeps you laughing. And she was at the gate that day. I'll never forget it. She was wearing a woven winter beanie on her head, even though it was 95 degrees outside. And she was standing at the gate shouting, "Tino, Tino!" And I'm still not really sure what that means, but she was calling me Tino and saying, "Welcome, come in, friend." And it couldn't have been a more perfect introduction to life at the Hogar. So Xiomara leads me into the orphanage and introduces me to the director, and the director gave me a tour. And I was totally overwhelmed by the things that I saw there that day. The first thing I noticed was that the entire Hogar is centered around a capilla, a church. All of the buildings surround this beautiful church, small stained glass windows, lovely building, and I thought immediately, I knew, this is a place of reverence. This is a place of respect for the lives that live here. And I just immediately had such a good feeling about the Hogar, and I looked around and noticed that it was clean. And as I met the residents, I could see that they were healthy and thriving in spite of the fact that they were in an orphanage, that they were happy and smiling, and that they would get hugs and kisses from the workers there. And I felt so grateful that they were in such a good environment. In spite of all the wonderful things I saw, though, I also saw some things that upset me that were very different from my experience working with persons with disabilities in the United States. I went into the dormitories, and they were these big rooms, white walls, white floors, no bedding on the beds, and actually the beds were they were cribs, but they were more like cages. They had bars on all sides, even above that, that the residents would be shut into these beds at night, and I suppose it was for their safety, but it was really disconcerting to see these big crib cages in the rooms. I then went out into the courtyard, and I met many more of the residents. There's about 150 residents that live there, and I noticed that some of the nonverbal residents, all of the nonverbal residents, had no way to communicate. They didn't have computers, assistive technology devices. They didn't even have picture books to point to pictures to describe their needs. They had nothing. So that's something I noticed immediately, that they had no way to communicate with the world around them. And that many of the residents in wheelchairs, none of the wheelchairs were electric wheelchairs. So wherever they were put at the beginning of the day was where they had to stay. They had no ability to move themselves or to make choices about where they wanted to go throughout the day. And there's only about 30 workers at the Hogar, maybe a few more than that, but compared to the number of residents, there's just no way that these well-meaning workers can provide all of the individualized attention and stimulation and education and love for each one of these residents that they would like to. They're a wonderful staff of people, but they can't possibly provide all of that for 150 residents. They provide for their physical needs, they keep them bathed and fed and clothed, and they love them, but they can't do much more than that. And so I remember after my tour walking into the director's office, and my head was just spinning with ideas of activities and projects and attention that we could give these residents throughout the summer. And I tried to tell her in my horrible Spanish how grateful I was that she'd let me come and how excited I was. And as I'm stumbling over my words, I feel this swell of emotion come over me, thinking about the lives that these people would have in America. What they could have if they had been born in a different place. And so many emotions, it was just too much for me, and I just sat in her office and cried. And I'm not a crier, so it kind of surprised me that I had that reaction, but I'll never forget that she came over and sat next to me and brought me a box of tissues, and said, "Why don't you come back tomorrow?" And that little statement changed my life, because I did go back the next day, and the next, and the next, and all summer a group of friends and I went pretty much every day to the Hogar and planned activities and fell in love with these kids. We started a project with communication books for the nonverbal residents so that they would have a way to point to pictures to communicate their needs. Now that's a huge project. You can't teach someone to communicate their needs in one summer, but we got something started. We introduced something. We did a quilt project with the kids where they each decorated a square, and we helped them sew a quilt for their caregivers. And they were thrilled to be able to give something to these people that took such good care of them. And we blew bubbles and read stories and colored pictures. And it was just a great summer. And at the end of it, I got a harebrained idea and asked the director if it would be possible for me to come back, for me and my fiance, who would be my husband, to come back and volunteer in the winter after we were married. And she said, "Yeah, you could even live here." And at first I thought, "Oh, I don't know, live here? Like in the dorms with the kids?" She said, "No, we have this little casita where you could live. It's empty." The founder of the Hogar, Padre Vito Garato, a Catholic priest, used to live there, but since he's passed away, it's just been empty. So I proposed the idea to my husband, and he was totally on board, even though neither of us speak Spanish very well. And we spent the first 3 months of our marriage living at the orphanage, and we shared a single bed, because that's all they had to offer us. And we spent every day, blowing bubbles, playing kickball, organizing scavenger hunts. I mean, really, what could be better? It was an amazing way to start our marriage. And one of my fondest memories from that time is that a group of residents would gather at the gate below our casita. Our casita was up on a hill, and the kids would gather down below at the gate. And every morning we could hear them, and they would be, excited and shouting our names. And we'd come around the corner, and when they'd see us, they'd throw their arms in the air and cheer that we were there. We were there again. And I remember always thinking, "You guys, we live here." But they were so genuinely surprised and excited every day when they saw us coming down to play with them for the day. And it was just such a rewarding experience, such a great way to start our marriage. I remember the day that I woke up in the United States after our 3-month adventure in El Salvador was over. I remember rolling over in the big comfortable bed and looking up and thinking, I'm not in El Salvador anymore, and rolling back over into my pillow and kind of moaning and starting to cry a little bit. I just thought about how those kids were down at the gate and they were calling our names, and we weren't we weren't going to be able to come. We weren't there anymore. And that thought really haunted me. As corny as it sounds, I almost felt like I could hear them. And I remember saying to my husband, Aida's calling our name and we're not there. And I just cried, and it broke my heart. And I just kept them in my thoughts and prayers over those months after we got back. And I often thought, we gave them a taste of this life. We gave them fun and love and attention, and then we left. So really, what did we give them? And it just stayed with me and weighed heavily on my heart. And one day I thought, that casita is empty. And even though we can't live there for the rest of our lives, there's no reason why other people can't stay there. And so I approached the director of Help International and proposed the idea of starting the Hogar del Niño project, and that we would send 2 volunteers for 3-month shifts year-round to live in the casita and to provide the stimulation and individualized attention that these residents deserve. And she agreed to make the Hogar del Niño project part of Help International. We raised about $20,000 from family and friends and started the program in 2007. And since that time, we've had volunteers there. Every year, there's been big spans of time when there have been volunteers there. We'd love to have people there year-round, with no break. But we haven't been able to find enough volunteers to make that possible yet. But we're hoping that ultimately, that will be the goal, to have people there year-round. We've had amazingly competent, qualified people apply, special education majors that have written IEPs for the students. We had a photography major take pictures of all of the residents, and she has given them, obviously for free, to the orphanage, and they use them for all of their fundraising materials. We had a couple of volunteers paint amazing, beautiful murals in the dormitory so that it wasn't this white, sterile environment anymore. We've had recreational therapists. We've had the most wonderful, qualified, competent people there at the Hogar that have made a huge difference, not only in the individual lives of the residents, but also in the organization as a whole. It has just been such a rewarding experience to see this program grow and evolve. I'm still involved. I still help recruit and train volunteers and communicate with them in country, and I'm able to go down and visit the kids about once a year, which is such a highlight for me. They've become such a huge part of my life, and it has just been an amazingly rewarding experience to work with Help International to form this program. And I strongly encourage anybody who may be interested in applying, or to think about the people in your life who you think would be a good fit for the program, and encourage them to apply. They can go to the Help International website and look under Hogar del Niño project. It will be a life-changing experience for you, I guarantee it, and you will make a difference in the lives of individual children. It has been a blessing and an honor to be involved there, and I hope that more people will get involved and volunteer. So thank you for your time, and I hope to hear from you soon and to see an application in the email box. Gracias, and good night.